Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to Women Who Rock with Success Media, an award-winning show for professional women and men. Since 2014, we have provided a voice for entrepreneurs in the areas of business, marketing, advertising, public speaking, lifestyle and wellness coaching, arts and entertainment, fashion designing, interior and exterior designing, and sports. Our guest experts provide the latest information in their field while creating an educational resource for our listeners and viewers. Join us each Thursday at 9 a.m. Central Time, followed by our latest brand, Women Who Rock Investigates. Now, let's go to the studio, where our session is already in progress with your show host, Mrs. Diane Winbush.
Women Who Rock with Success complies with the rules and terms according to the Federal Communications Commission podcast guidelines. The views and opinions expressed by our guests are their own, and their appearance on our digital media platforms does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. All guests who embrace our media stations are experts who are licensed in their fields of occupation. All rights reserved.
And good morning and welcome to Women Who Rock with Success Media. This is our second show for today. And so thank everyone for tuning and coming back in on the show. So on this segment for the 10 o'clock hour, we have a special guest that's in the studio with us today, and she is an actor for Real Housewives of Toronto, Canada. But we're also going to be talking about her new releases coming up in the month of May, if I got that right. So let's welcome to the studio, everyone, Miss Kara Alloway. So good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. Yes, it's releasing May 30th.
May 30th. Wow. Okay, great. So first of all, Kara, with your busy schedule, of course, we thank you for being with us on today as well. So tell us a little bit about you. I guess what kind of thrives you to be able to get into the acting business, and then we're going to dive into some more things later on in the podcast in regards to the book that's coming up.
Sure, Diane. I think it's a really interesting choice of words you used to say that I was an actress on the Real Housewives of Toronto, because that really is one of the most popular questions asked, and it's one that when I speak with other housewife participants, they say, So are you acting or is it real? And I absolutely love that you chose that word. Brilliant choice of words. So what we say within the Housewives franchise, we say we were participants on the show as opposed to actors. Okay. Now, that being said, people will always ask me, were you acting? Was that really you? Were you really that upset? Were you really that nervous? Don't you realize the cameras are on you? Are you aware of it? I compare the experience to anyone who has ever done improv in an acting class. So you are asked to be, and the producers encourage you to be yourself, your very true self. That being said, they set you up in a scene or a situation. You know, today you and this other young lady are going to be having lunch. You're going to be talking about the party you attended last night. And by the end of the luncheon, make sure that she invites you to this party on the weekend and go. Okay. And then you sit there and you are your authentic self interacting with another individual, perhaps discussing something that occurred the night before or a tension you have between the two of you. So I know that wasn't the question you asked me. I know you asked how I got involved in this, but I found it so interesting that you used that choice of words, the actor, because, you know, it's an interesting topic about reality television and reality TV content in general. I got involved in it because I had always wanted to produce. I always wanted to tell stories. I started out as a writer and a journalist, and I just enjoyed telling stories. And the production company that was doing Toronto Housewives, I had pitched them an idea for a reality show, nothing to do with Housewives, but another reality show that I wanted to produce. And they came back to me and said, listen, we're doing the Toronto franchise of the Housewives show, and we think you'd be great on it, and you can use that sort of as a launching pad for your reality producing vision. Which I did after when you go and you take meetings and you say, well, I'd like to produce this show, and you're pitching to film companies and networks and whatnot, and you say, I'd like to produce this show. This is my idea. Here's my sizzle reel. When you can add, oh, by the way, I have been a reality television show participant. It's really, really, I think, a great asset, because having worked on both sides of the camera, I've walked in both shoes. I've walked in the producer's shoes. I've walked in the participant's shoes.
Okay.
So I have an ability to engage with the participants on a different level by saying, I've been in your shoes. I understand, or you're nervous about this, or I understand this is a concern of yours. I've been there before.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's how I got involved in it.
Okay, great. Yeah, because I always try to use the word actress, because individuals, they try to figure out the differences, the difference between an actor, or is it real play, or is it really a teleplay? And so it's very, very important. So I still see it as an actress. You're still on live TV. You're still on the camera. And so it is very, 100%. Very important. Yeah, and it's just like...
and what I find interesting is I think people with an acting background make for good reality television participants. I think having an acting background is helpful, because you need to have that ability to improv and think on your feet. You can't ever say no in a situation. I mean, there's the famous Denise Richards, bravo, 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 where she wanted to stop the action because she wasn't comfortable with where it was going. But really, you can't do that. You have to be able to be in the present and have those acting chops to be able to say, okay, let's just go with the flow and see what's here. And surprisingly, maybe not a lot of the public knows, but a lot of the Real Housewives franchise participants do have an acting background to some degree.
Background. Absolutely. And I really think, Kara, that is so important, because you can kind of tell the difference when you're watching any, I guess, type of show. If it's real reality, it's gonna... you kind of maybe can kind of see, you can kind of a little bit tell if the person just got on the set maybe about 3 months earlier versus someone that is seasoned and is very, very detailed and experienced in their, I guess, their gesture, their language. It's kind of different for me. So that's the reason why I said actress, and I'm going to continue to say actress into what you are. I think it brings a little bit more professionalism than I would say, your real life TV. So, yeah. So anyway, thank you so much for that. So, so what was that like? So we're going to go back. We talked about the actress, so we're going to go back as to, I guess, what was your passion to be able to get into acting as well?
Sure. So I actually was a child actress when I was little. It's an interesting story. I was a very shy young lady, and someone told my mother the best way to get a young lady over shyness, and this is when I was I was very young, like maybe 7 or so. Someone suggested to my mom that I try auditioning for commercials and that I go about that route, which sounds bizarre. Why would you take a shy child and do that? But the idea that as a child you have to walk into a room and present yourself. I mean, the first time I was clinging to my mom's leg, but by the 6th time I knew what was expected of me. And there was also something very releasing in acting where I could be another person and I didn't need to worry about being shy. Because I have heard that a lot of actors are not necessarily people, that, you go in and you take on a role or something like that. I mean, even if I'm thinking I did a Doritos commercial, I was a mouse in a Doritos commercial. So I'm thinking, even as that mouse, I wasn't worried about being embarrassed or making a fool of myself or dancing with a giant Doritos potato chip, or I actually danced with a giant wedge of cheese. I wasn't worried about that because I was, it's a characterization. So I got into acting thanks to my mom, and it did work. It really did. And ironically, I did the same thing with my youngest son. He was a very shy boy. And I thought, you know what, here we go. So we went, and I started getting him into auditioning for commercials. Before I knew it, he was in the union. He did really well. He did exceptionally well, actually, at voice work, which is kind of funny. And so it really worked for, I would encourage you, if you're a parent of a small child, acting is really not a bad venue to release them from that shyness.
Right. Absolutely. We had, I think it was Kelly Allen, if I'm not mistaken, and of course she played in a lot of childhood, type of scenes as well. Back in her day, and I think she kind of, went through the ranks and the hoops and what have you, and so today she's working as a producer, something that you have kind of passed along and what have you, and now you're, doing the reality TV show, and so I just think that is so wonderful. I love to hear about individuals that are willing to go out in front of the media and say, look, here it goes, here am I, here's something that I've learned, or here's my trend, or what have you. But a lot of times, Kara, you get, well, I don't know. I guess I would say this is my opinion. This is not a statistic. I just think you get more from the television, any television broadcast, if it's a reality TV show, when the person has a background in acting. I just think it's so more effective to me. And, and so glad that we have you here.
I know what you're saying. There's a presence, right? There's a learned presence.
I do believe that. And then the person that has the training and the academic, scholarly, or however you want to put it, background or studio background profession, they can be able to come in out of the scene and know how to interact, even if a person gets off. I think Chris Tucker someone had made whoever played starred with him in a movie. They kind of said, okay, he was able to, even though he kind of got off track or something like that from what the actor was trying to say. And then by him being trained, the actor, he knew how to move in and out with Chris Tucker. And so that's very, very important. So if you don't have that type of background, scholarly background, or, being, on the stage, in theater or anything like that, you won't know how to be able to move and maneuver in and out of those scenes like that. So I thought that was so wonderful as to how he was able to do that, was able to read that actor in that type of way. So I thought that was wonderful too. So before we get into the book, we want to talk about another thing. So now you stated that you're passionate about boots on the ground. We want to talk about some of the charities that you're involved in, because we want the audience to get a little bit to learn about you, and then we're going to dive right into the book, and then they'll say, oh, okay, then this is what her heart is, and so this is why we know why she's here on the reality, or why she wrote the book. We'll put it that way. So talk to us a little bit about that, about the boots on the ground.
Yes, so when I married my husband, it was very interesting. He had spent some time doing charity work, living in Africa. He had traveled to do charity work in China. He was really quite the world traveler. And I remember I was always fascinated because he could get into discussions with people and speak about things like, which now this might sound bizarre, but he would speak about, you never forget that African sky, and the contrast of the beauty of the African sky compared to the smell of poverty. And I can remember the first time I heard that, and I thought, I don't know what that is. And he would speak of India and saying, the scenes in India. And I thought, I want my exposure to helping people to be more than writing a check. I want to be able to say, I've experienced this, and I was always so envious of that. So when my eldest son, I want to experience it firsthand. I really did. I really had. Okay. I can't explain it except to say, a voice inside me that said, I want to be able to say, I've walked this walk. I've visualized it firsthand. So when my eldest child was 12 years old, my girlfriend had a charity called Women for Orphans and Widows out of Malawi. Now, Malawi, I'm not sure if you know, but it is the poorest country in the world. And so I said to my 12-year-old son, you and I are going with my dear friend Rita, and we are going to go to Malawi, and we are going to help. However, Rita needs help on, she went on these various trips throughout the year delivering supplies and much needed funds, but also, certain medications that they couldn't even get over there, everything. And also my son and I had a little funny thing we did where we did puppet shows. So when Rita heard this, she said, brilliant, you bring your puppet shows in the puppet theater, and we'll be leaving those there when we leave. But, we're going to entertain some of the kids in the slums. Now, coming from a city like Toronto, when I areas, My goodness, that compared to the poor area of Malawi is like night and day. So we went, and it was life-changing. It was life-changing for the two of us. There is nothing I have ever experienced like it. I never felt like I was in danger. I love Malawi because we met an Indian, not an Indian chief, we met a chief over there who, she runs an organization called Somebody Cares. Her name is Teresa Malila. Your viewers have to all go look her up on Facebook. Teresa Malila, Somebody Cares. And she is a chief of the community there because in Malawi, chiefdom is not passed down in a male hierarchy. It's like a birth order. So she inherited this chiefdom. And the respect she has from the communities is jaw-dropping. I never once feared for my life. I mean, I felt safer there than I have ever felt anywhere in Toronto. She garners respect. She is boots on the ground helping people. She is, in there with her sleeves rolled up. She's just, I can't say enough about her and the experience and what we experienced going over there and what we saw. I mean, my son and I could not make a material purchase when we returned to North America for maybe, I would say, 8 months, because you just see we have so much when these people have nothing. But there was also so much joy. The contrast between people who had nothing but at the same time had this incredible joy. We had our cell phones with us, and we would take pictures of the children who would scream with joy and delight, and they were so happy, and they couldn't even understand why did you travel so far to come be with us? That meant the world to them, and it was just such an impactful trip. So after that trip, we were hooked. We became mom and son. My other two children were too young to travel with me, so we became the mom and son, boots on the ground. We installed reverse osmosis water filters in Nicaragua. We traveled to Ecuador and helped a sort of like a Doctors Without Borders type organization. We were over there helping, they would take remote medical clinics to people. There were women who were 9 months pregnant who had never seen a doctor because it just wasn't accessible to them. I know. Wow. When I think of what we have in North America, vis-a-vis what there are these parts of the world in South America, in Africa, in India, that don't have. It was so eye-opening, and what it did was it lit the fire under my philanthropic stove, for lack of a better word. I love sharing these stories with people like yourself. It's just, it's so eye-opening. So I can't tell you how much I would encourage people, if you have the opportunity, to go on one of these, there's all sorts of organizations that say, do you want to help? Do you want to travel with us? Because they always need people bringing, on one of our medical trips, we brought 2 duffel bags full of vitamins, of prenatal vitamins, of that we have access to here that we take so much for granted, that people living in these remote communities, we would take bus rides for 4 hours to get to these communities into the mountains in Ecuador, where, the woman that hadn't seen a doctor, well, she didn't see a doctor because her family didn't have a car. How would she access a doctor?
Right. Wow, that is so awesome. And so boots on the ground, that sends volume as to what you and your son, even was able to do. Just to kind of add a little bit to that, there was a family member, and of course their mom was married to a Nigerian African, and so they went to see him and his family in Nigeria. So they became ill. The 2 daughters did. They were born here in America, and they are American children. And so once they went there, they did not even have the resources. The mom actually had to, they were dying, the 2 daughters were. When they went to Nigeria to visit their dad, they took sick all of a sudden because of, I don't know, what was going on there, but the mom had any number. I mean, the number of vaccines we had to have before we traveled, I can imagine. Yeah, the mom had to wire Tylenol to the country, and that is what healed them. I'm like, wow. It was just the Tylenol. And they got up the next day and was walking around, and I'm pretty sure they was looking for the first flight back to America, too.
Oh, I'm sure they were.
But, but that's just something just to think about. We have so much here, and we take for granted. We complain. We whine about every little thing. And there are individuals that, as you stated, they get joy over the smallest things that they have access to. And we have the world, and we still, not satisfied, I guess.
We met one woman who was HIV positive, she was looking after her sister's children because her sister had passed away. And she would walk every day to get her medicine for 3 hours to the hospital. So 3 hours there, 3 hours back, just to get her medicine so she could stay alive and care for her sister's children.
So you actually
the
saw
stories.
I mean,
I could go on. I could take up all your time with the stories.
Oh, wow.
They were just
that
incredible.
Yeah.
But
so,
the organization that I just absolutely love is called Somebody Cares, and it's out of Malawi, and the woman who runs it is Teresa Malila.
Okay. And on our Christian, we have a Christian podcast that we do like early in the morning, like 5 o'clock. That's what we were doing. We kind of use that platform to be able to talk to our guests about giving, charitable giving. You know, and I think we had the Salvation Army, one of their lieutenants, on last week, and so that's what we're trying to do. We're going to try to work with the Ronald McDonald House here in the U.S., and so I think that is so very important. Wow, that is just so awesome. And so I was actually able to meet. I'm pretty sure they were, yelling and screaming. They were actually able to meet a live actress. So that probably did their hearts a world of good when you came over there with your son. I'm serious, sure it did. Yeah. So the next question, before we get into the book, I got one more question too. So take us into the acting play that you play on the Toronto Housewives of Toronto. Take us a little bit into your play role. And so what you play.
Well, I was.
I wanted to go ahead.
So, interesting point here. When you do these shows, before you do the show, you undergo a medical physical and a psychological assessment. And we're told it's for insurance purposes to make sure, that the production company who is investing this money in you is, okay, that you're okay to continue. So after the show wrapped, I contacted the firm that did the psychological assessment, and I said, I'm so curious, could I see a copy of my psychological assessment results? And they said, sure, so they sent them to me. And the first line of my psychological assessment was, Kara has a very high emotional intelligence, which to someone else that might not mean a lot, but to me, having been educated on how to produce reality television, that told it all. So individuals who have a high emotional intelligence are individuals who are not content just to waft through life, but who feel things deeply. And in the world of reality television, those are the individuals who usually end up the villains. They're usually the truth tellers. They're usually the ones who are a little bit, I like to say brave. Some people say unfiltered. And that was me. So I was the villain of the show. I was the protagonist of the show. I was the one who was emotionally intelligent. I was the one who felt things deeply and passionately. I was the one not content to sweep anything under the rug. And everybody processes problems differently, and that's fair. That's 100% fair. However, I just happen to be one of those people that if I have a problem with you, we need to talk about it. We need to reach some sort of mutual resolution, and then we can move on. And I get through it very quickly. I don't hold grudges. I move on. I'm happy to, be forgiven as well as receive forgiveness and move on. And that, in a nutshell, I did not know. I was not aware at the time, but that makes for the ideal villain on reality television. So needless to say, I was the villain in the cast of Toronto. And, it was an interesting experience, and I learned so much about myself, and I learned so much about my shortcomings, and I was able to grow so much as a person. So when people say to me, did you like it? And I say, at the time it was so tumultuous. It was such an incredible learning experience that I don't have any regrets whatsoever about participating in it.
Oh, wow. That is so very awesome. That is you can be able to act and then also grasp some things about yourself as well while, I guess when you kind of wind down from off the TV scene or set, you can be able to learn a little bit about yourself too. Wow, that is so awesome. Now, here's the meat and potatoes right here. Most hated. That's where we're getting to the meat and potatoes. Most hated. So tell us a little about that because I know, I've read some of the information in regards to it consists of some of the, the TV play as well and what have you. And so take us a little bit into the story plot. I'm excited to hear about this one.
Well, I'll tell you, I always wanted to write a book that dealt with female friendships because I found them so fascinating. I come from a family of all girls. I went to an all-girls school. It's funny that the one who was surrounded by all girls, I ended up having 3 boys, but that's for another show. But I always wanted to write and discuss female interpersonal relationships because I find them fascinating. And I knew I would write this book. I just didn't know what the setting would be. So after I did the Toronto franchise of Housewives, I felt like I had found my perfect setting. And I said, this is great. I am going to talk about production, about behind the scenes, the interpersonal relationships that go on amongst the participants on a reality show, and all these female relationships. And that's exactly what I did. So to research for my characterization, I read a book by Dr. Phyllis Chesler called Woman's Inhumanity to Woman. And it was so eye-opening, and so it informed me so much for the characters in this book, because at the end of the day, women are such fascinating creatures, and I consider myself a second-generation feminist. And we don't often talk about how we treat one another as women because we have so many other issues we're battling, which is very fair. We have a lot of issues we're battling. So we don't often spend a lot of time dwelling on how we treat one another. But there are certain ways we engage with other women that are flawed and that we need to change and that are sociologically embedded in us. And I don't know if that's from women being exposed to so much misogyny that maybe as women we sort of incorporate that to the way we treat other women, such that if another woman is different, it starts at the age of 8 in the schoolyard with young girls. So I took all of this information, I fed it into the characterization in my book, and I wanted to deal with different aspects of the sisterhood. So I have a character who is the wife of a man who was accused of sexual misconduct, because I always found that so fascinating. We hear so much about the perpetrator. We hear so much about the victims, which we should hear a lot about. But I always was curious, what about the wife? What happens to her? What does she think? You know, like, what is she suffering? What is she feeling? What's going on with her? Then I also happened to be very privileged in Toronto. I was a member of a book club that was populated by a lot of wives of professional sports figures. And I learned so much about that world and what the wives give up as the wife of a professional sports player, what you give up, what you sacrifice, what you invest with your family. So I have another character who is married to a professional sports player. I have, of course, a producer who is female, and it's incredibly relatable for any woman who has ever been mistreated by another woman, the dynamic that goes on between the characters in my book. Because I think that's something that we as women have to discuss. Why do we treat each other this way? How do we change this? You know, where does this stem from? And how can we turn this around? Because we have to do better as women. The sisterhood can be incredibly powerful, but we have to bond together and we have to look after each other first. So those are all themes that I explore in this story. And it is a story. It sounds very deep. It's a very light, fun beach read. If you like reality television, it's like reality television, but on the printed page. It's a little salacious. It's cheeky. You'll laugh. It's just a light read and a light story, and I had a lot of fun creating it.
Right. Okay. Awesome. Because I think it's very important, Kara, as you stated, that we have to get to the real nugget as to why women treat other women in a certain way. And then it was something else that you stated. Sometimes when individuals go through different things, we never get the aspect as to what the wife has went through. And then especially now we had a guest probably about 3 years ago that was on the show, and she was a former wife of one of professional NFL players, but we could not somehow air the show simply because of the fact that she spilled all of her goods out over. Yeah, it was really deep.
Oh, I bet that was fascinating, isn't it?
It was, but I'm like, wait a minute, you're telling too much, and she did. It was so much energy that she poured out, and I'm like, No, not here. but I listened. But we had to make a choice as to whether to edit and produce that or not, because it was some very inflammatory things that were said about the NFL player. And of course, that's something we don't badger individuals on our media platforms and things. But after everything was over with, I kind of felt, I guess, sorrowful, sympathetic for her. I guess that would be the word, because she was burnt out, and she wanted the world to know what type of individual he actually was. They were no longer married or anything like that. But I just thought about, I'm like, I wouldn't use media to bash him. You know, use a book, put it in a book if that's something. You know, I wouldn't get on live television, and I wouldn't get on the podcast to be able to do that.
Write a fiction story. It's very therapeutic to get everything out.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
And one theme that really resonated with me that I think is the theme within my book is, you don't have to love or even like another woman in order to work together productively, but you must respect one another. You must respect. And if we could teach our young women that, I think we would be so far ahead in the game.
Absolutely, absolutely. I agree. Kara, thank you so much for being with us today. And, of course, we do not want you to be able to exit the studio unless you share how the listeners can be able to find your new release, any information, any websites or links that you want them to share, that you want them to follow you on after the show. You can be able to share that at this time. You can share it with the listeners.
Wonderful. So my book is available. It's called Most Hated by Kara Alloway. It's available for pre-order on Amazon.com. And I'm also giving away 10 autographed copies in a pre-release through the Goodreads site, goodreads.com. If you search Most Hated Kara Alloway, you can enter a contest there to win one of 10 autographed pre-release copies of the book. My Instagram is very easy. It's Kara Alloway, KaraAlloway. And my website is karaalloway.com. And I love to hear from people. I always say I love to tell stories, but I like to hear people's stories too. So please stay in touch and share your stories with me.
Absolutely. And listeners, you can be able to go to YouTube under the Entertainment Canada site, where you can be able to follow the trailers that they have coming out for the first and second season of Toronto Housewives of Toronto. And so you can be able to also catch a few little clips there too as well. So once again, Kara, thank you for being our guest today, and we are waiting on that new release to come out on May the 30th. So everyone, have a wonderful day, and meet us right back at 11 o'clock at the top of the hour for our next guest on Women Who Rock with Success Media. Thank you so much, Kara.
Thank you, Diane. My pleasure.